Hi, this is David Saffir. I'm the presenter for today regarding the new Datacolor Spyder4. We're going to talk about, we're going to introduce it to you and talk about some new features. Kim, can you send me a text if everybody can hear me? I can't tell, of course. Okay, so everybody can hear me. Thanks for attending. I appreciate it very much, and I'm sure the Datacolor people do too. Again, my name is David Saffir. I'm a professional photographer. I live in Santa Clarita, California. I'm actually a photographer and a printmaker, and I've long had an interest in color management. And I hope to help you understand how the Spyder4 technology can help you in your photography and imaging work. Now, one of the things that's important to understand about the Spyder4 is that it has significantly expanded capabilities. It's intended, of course, to help you improve your on-screen image quality, accuracy, and consistency, but it's also very, very well matched to wide gamut displays. And as we all know, many companies are offering greatly improved displays in terms of not just the visual quality and sharpness, but the palette of colors, the range of colors, how wide the gamut is very much improved. And of course, the cost of that real estate has come down significantly. One good reason to calibrate your display is screen to print match. Many people get, I guess I would say, trapped in the cycle of making a print and it doesn't match the screen. So they tweak what's on the screen and make another print, and they go tweak, print, tweak, print. And the problem with that, of course, is the cost. You know, an 8x10 is $1.50 a page. So pretty soon you go from a relatively inexpensive print to a $10 8x10. And as far as I'm concerned, that's a little bit too much. Now, there's a number of other reasons, including ease of use. There's a lot more flexibility in the types of images that you can see effectively, those with a lot of highlight and shadow detail, for example, that you want to be able to manage and control. And the software that comes with the Spyder4 gives you real power in terms of managing your color workflow, managing what you see on the screen, testing your results, and those kinds of things. So why color calibration? Let's continue with that thought for a minute. And by the way, I want to make a point in line with this picture that you see on the right. The Spyder4 can calibrate your iPad and iPhone, and later on we'll see how that works. But we're also going to see what kind of difference it makes. But you can tune your display for accuracy and consistency across multiple platforms: desktop, laptop, projectors, iPad, iPhone, in work groups. In many cases, there's a need to get people in sync color-wise so that they're all producing things that look the same. That's not such a bad idea. I use it to color calibrate my laptop and my desktop machines to be as close as I can get them. And that's very useful to me because and the iPad, because I'm constantly making presentations to clients, or I'm teaching classes, or I'm working in the field, and the color consistency is absolutely critical to my success. One of the other things that's important in calibration is controlling highlight and shadow detail and luminance. A display that's calibrated or not calibrated, calibrated incorrectly or not calibrated at all, is frequently going to hide detail from you. It's going to not give you a very good representation of what your shadow detail is really going to look like when you're done, or your highlight detail. It may disappear or be misrepresented. And that can be a real problem. You go to make a print and all of a sudden the nice shadows underneath the trees, or the texture in a particular item in the image is not there anymore. And you're wondering what happened. Well, during the editing process, because the screen was inaccurate, your editing, your changes that you made when you were editing didn't really show up on the screen. They showed up in your print. now you have to start over. That doesn't really strike me as something you want to be doing. Another thing to note is that displays change over time. That lighting system that keeps the screen illuminated changes, sometimes as much as 25% a year. And so you want to keep an eye on that, and redoing the calibration at least once a month is a good idea, if for no other reason than that one. The other thing is that some of these wide gamut displays, and I've heard this from a number of people, may look oversaturated or be very high contrast. And a lot of them ship from the factory that way. They're not necessarily intended for photographers. They're intended for use, or the factories set them up so that they can be used in an office environment, but not necessarily by a photographer in the way a photographer wants to use it. And so it arrives, it sits on your desk, and it looks oversaturated, and there's too much contrast, and the highlight detail is gone. That's why you pick up the Spyder4 and calibrate it. Now we have a little poll. I wanted to ask everybody how often they calibrate. Is it once a week, once a month, once every quarter, every 3 months, or a season, once a year, or never? So let's take a moment and see. Well, I'm really impressed. We're almost to 60% on once a month. I congratulate you. That's a really strong showing, 56%. Now, here's some of the features and benefits of the Spyder4. And I'm speaking to the Elite model right now. There's 3 different models. But 6 main features: auto color and brightness calibration. There's a full spectrum color sensor. You only need 1 device. The device accuracy and stability have been improved. Ambient light adaptation, and there's some added software options. And let's go through these briefly and make sure that you at least understand the highlights of this. The auto color and brightness calibration, it easily calibrates to reference conditions, and what that simply means is correct color. There's a full spectrum color sensor. That's improved over the current 3-channel RGB sensors. It's particularly important if you have a wide gamut display, or even a fairly wide gamut display. You'll find that I'll just talk about my own experience. I have a wide gamut display on my desktop, and the areas of transition from, say, lower to higher contrast, or one highly saturated color to another, those areas are much smoother, they're easier to see, and they look, I guess you would say, more realistic. They don't look distorted. They don't have digital footprints all over them. Only 1 device is needed. It works with all kinds of displays, LCD and LEDs, laptops, desktops, projectors, and of course the iPad and the iPhone. The accuracy, the new design is the accuracy is increased by 26%. Give me a second here. I'm going to do something with my screen. I'm not sure what to do with my screen. Well, I have a note here that says I'm no longer in full screen mode, and I'm not exactly sure what to do about it. Can everybody see me all right? Damn it. I guess I'll leave it the way it is. Sorry. Okay. There's some added software options. There's some visual fine-tuning options. There's video presets for Cineon, NTSC, PAL. There's some really nice reports for analysis of display quality. There are gamma, white, and black luminance adjustments, and more. Now, the full spectrum color sensor, it's a 7-channel sensor. It covers the color spectrum better than the 3-channel RGB sensors that are on the market. There's only 1 device needed. I think it's interesting to note, particularly in light of the comment I made before about smoothness and realism, is that it's calibrated to see color the way the eye sees color. And I think that's important. I don't really want to have to be making decisions about the work that I'm doing and trying to guess what's going to happen on the from an output device, whether it's a display or a printer or whatever the deal is. Now, the calibration, the Spyder4 Elite, you install the software. It's really quite straightforward. You can download it. You connect the Spyder4 device via the USB port, and this can be wizard driven. Some people call it next driven, where there's a little button right here that takes you from one screen to the next. And it's really very straightforward. The wizard asks you to choose your display type. You do that, and then you choose your display settings and targets. Now, before we get into that, I want to talk about calibration in your working environment. I took this picture in an office I was visiting, and I took the picture not because I think it's a particularly good example. I think actually that it's one of the worst working environments I've seen, and here's the reason. The first one is that you have a window that's brighter than the screen right behind the screen. Now, if it was anywhere in the room, it would probably be an issue, but this one is right behind the screen. Another thing is this room is painted green. Now, dominant colors in the room are going to affect your color vision. It can't be helped. And so this green room, if you look, for example, at the print lower left, that looks a little bit green to me on my screen. In fact, everything in the room looks a little bit that way. And so what you really want is an environment that is, how do I put this, more user-friendly. That you want to have the screen be the brightest thing in the room. And the room doesn't need to be pitch black. You can have a small light going or a little bit of window light. But you want the screen to dominate so that your eye adapts to that. And, of course, you don't want the overhead fluorescence on. I go to people's studios and homes all the time to help them with their color management. And I consistently find that they flip the overhead lights on out of habit. So control your environment and you'll be a much happier camper as a photographer and a printmaker. Another point I want to make before we proceed is that I have gotten questions about on-screen help and things like that over the past few weeks. And the embedded help screens that are available throughout the calibration process are some of the best I've ever seen. You get short answer, long answer. It tells you why you're doing what you're doing. It tells you the options that are available and what the results should look like. And it offers some troubleshooting advice. So the help screens are there. They're embedded in the software, and they're really quite useful. Now, on the calibration, if you choose the wizard-driven option, this is one of the screens that you'll see, and going from top to bottom, you'll notice it says recal, which is recalibrate your display, check cal, which is check the accuracy of your current calibration, and full calibration. Now, obviously, the first time you would use this, you would go for full calibration, and we'll talk about that for a moment. The recommended settings, which will work in most situations, are on the screen that you see here. It's gamma 2.2. The white point is 6500 and the brightness is 120. Now that's 120 candelas per square meter, which is a bit of an archaic way of putting things. It's definitely not as bright as the screen is going to be 99% of the time when it comes out of the box for the first time. The screen is going to come out of the box at 400 plus usually. And 120 is a level that will let you see highlight and shadow detail reasonably well. And so in what I would call an ideal setting, somewhere between 100, 110, 120 is going to give you very nice desktop display with good detail, and it'll be easy on the eyes as well. And again, what you don't want in the room is to have another light source, such as an open window with bright sunlight or bright overhead lights competing with your display. Now, once you've done your calibration, you have a couple of options here. At a later date, you can go back and recalibrate it, which takes less time than a full calibration. Or you can just check the calibration, the accuracy of your current setup, and make sure that everything is in order. And those are nice features. Those don't take very much time. I use them fairly often, particularly, well, here's a good example. I make a print. I come over to the display and I put the print in my light box and I look at the print and the display, and they're just not in sync. Well, one would normally think, well, something's wrong with the printer, or I did something wrong with the printmaker. But some of us don't naturally think that maybe there's something going on with the computer or the screen calibration. And the fastest thing, the easiest thing to do first is to do a check cal or a recal, because it's very quick. It'll tell you right away if perhaps your screen calibration got corrupted during a screen crash or something like that earlier in the week. And you'll know right away, well, now the screen looks good, so I need to go over to the printer and maybe do a print head cleaning or a print head alignment or something else like that, some kind of minor maintenance. But this is really the place to start, is check the screen first. And most people don't. It'll save you some time and effort and aggravation. Now the calibration runs pretty simply. Here's a photograph of the Spyder4 on a screen, and it's running the color patches. And what it's doing is it's displaying a color patch at a preset value. And the Spyder4 measures what it's being shown and compares that to the desired value, the standard value of the color. And it's creating a calculation of how to adjust the monitor to make it as accurate as it can be. And it runs through the color patches. It also is looking for your white and black point, the highlight and shadow, et cetera, and it's running through all those tests automatically, and it's going to create a profile that your computer will remember, and that profile will be used to adjust the monitor every time you start the computer up. Now, if you choose, instead of the wizard-based setup, you choose the expert console, you can see that there's almost every option under the sun here. You can select the display you're calibrating. Let's say you have 2 displays connected to your computer. You can select, number 2, a preset target or any number of color temperatures, for example, or some of the television-based and other color schemas that are available. You can also measure your, I'm going to skip down here, instead of picking a target and picking your white point, you can also measure your ambient light. I'm going to skip forward a screen. And it will measure the light in your room, and when I did this one, it showed that the room was actually too dark. It recommended 90 at 5,000, and you can accept those suggested settings, and they'll be incorporated into your calibration. You can set luminance. Black luminance is a bit of a problem with modern displays. I'm not going to get into the details, but a lot of the so-called black level controls and black controls on the displays are actually not very useful. But certainly the white luminance can be set to the level that you desire. Under options, gray balance, calibration, iterative means that it's going to go through a series of tests on the gray balance on your display, and it's going to take a little bit longer. You can turn that off if you wish, but I prefer the iterative gray balance. It takes a little bit longer, but it does give a better result, particularly if you're doing any kind of work in black and white printmaking. I think that's it for that one. There's more behind this, but it would probably not fit within the time frame that we have allotted to us today. Now, when you're done, one of the things that you're going to see is this profile overview. And I think that's particularly useful. And this sort of triangular-shaped color map is a representation, if memory serves, of what we can see. And then the purple line, as you can see, I've checked Adobe RGB. The purple line is the range of color that you will see under Adobe 98, which most of us use for our viewing and printing. And the red line is actually what the monitor that I'm using tests out to. So it exceeds Adobe 98 in some areas. Now you can print this as a report. You can also compare one monitor to another. Let's say you've calibrated 2 monitors. So it's a very useful tool. Now there's another software feature built into the Spyder4 Elite. It's called Spyderproof, and you can compare your calibrated view to your uncalibrated view. And the calibrated view is on the upper left, and the uncalibrated view is on the lower right. And there's some things to take note of here. If you look at these photographs, for example, there's definitely a difference in contrast and saturation. I'm not sure if you can see this over the internet on your display, but the uncalibrated view also has a magenta cast to it. And so in the black and white segments, you can see that there is a color cast here, particularly in the woman's face, versus the calibrated view here on the upper left. Now, these photographs are grouped into segments, first of all, into 4 segments. So if this screen is showing in front of you, you can double-click on any quadrant, upper left, upper right, lower left. And you'll see these 4 images enlarged. And you can also click on a particular image and enlarge that to fit this frame. And you can turn the calibration, the preview on and off, so you can see what it looks like in a particular type of image. So for example, this picture of the church, notice the blues in the sky from here to here. They're really quite different. And if you enlarge them, it would be even a more significant difference to the eye. Now, there's another feature in here that I particularly like, and I'll talk a little bit about the way I use it. You can use it in a number of ways. But what I like to do is to try and get my laptop and my desktop displays to match as much as I can. Now, there's an issue there. The laptops, generally speaking, just don't have the color gamut or the color palette that the desktop does. They're a different animal. The laptop screens are made to save power, to have lighter weight. They don't have the angle of view left to right, top to bottom to give you a good, how do I put this? They have a narrow angle of view. You can't look at them from the side as much as you can a desktop display. And so it's kind of difficult to match them just by doing a calibration. However, if you have the SpyderTune up on the screen, let's say after you've calibrated your laptop, you can use these controls and you can tweak the laptop so it's a little bit closer to your desktop display. People have also told me that if they have an older desktop display and they want to get a closer match to their printer, that they will sometimes use this to just tweak it a little bit so that it better matches the printer. Sometimes it's not possible to calibrate as perfectly as with a newer device. Now, I just want to take a look at this. The questions. Okay. Now, there's some very, very interesting reports and analyses that are available through this software. And I have to say I get teased a little bit by some of the people at Datacolor because I really have focused on these. I'm going to go straight to the one that I think is particularly important, and then I'll show you a couple of others. Now, this is an eye test. I admit it. It's full of numbers and things. It's enough to make you, roll your eyes back in your head. But what this does is it's giving you the results for the color patches that have been tested during the calibration. And the way you measure, it's sort of a pass-fail in one respect, is that in this center column, if you can read it, it says delta E right at the top. Now, delta E is a fancy way of saying what difference can you discern with the human eye? And typically, you want to see a value of 3 or less. Ideally, you would like it to be 1 or 2. And although an individual color may not pass that test or test of reasonableness, the average of all of them, for example, in this case, is 1.8, which is very good. In other words, whatever color inaccuracies are present in the overall display and in the range of colors that you would see, for example, in a typical photograph, the differences are not discernible to the human eye. Most people just won't notice that there's something out of whack, that the display is probably as good as it's possible for a modern display to get. Now, I've calibrated some very expensive displays, and they get down to, say, a delta E of 0.8. But as a practical matter, I don't have any trouble working with a display that's at a delta E of 2 and getting good screen-to-print match. So the thing is, though, is that this is a really nice test. For example, if you have several monitors in a workplace, even if they're made by the same manufacturer, there may be differences between them. This is a good way to compare their performance. If one is getting a little bit older, you're going to see that delta E perhaps start to creep up, and once it starts to push that limit of 3, you may want to start thinking about replacing it. On the other hand, if you've just gotten a monitor out of the box, then you've calibrated it maybe once, 2 or 3 times, and it's consistently running over a delta E of 3, it might not be working correctly. If it's a good, high quality, moderate to wide gamut display. So you've got some tools in here that can really help you manage your workplace if you want to use them. There are other reports. For example, this one is showing you how even the backlight is, and this is an example that's a little bit extreme. To have a delta, E of 4.3 in this corner, I think is a little bit unusual. You will see when you do this test on almost every display that there's a sweet spot somewhere near the center, usually right in the middle, and that's a function of the engineering in many cases. But what you shouldn't see is really radical changes in the corners and things like that. And there are other tests on here as well. There's a tone response test. There's also, when you do all the tests, there's a monitor rating. It's kind of cute with all the little spiders running around on the page, but it will show you the relative scores in each category. And again, this is a way of checking the response of your display over time. It's also a good way to compare one display to another, or the use of one type of target to another. For example, you remember before that we have many options in setting up the display calibration in terms of luminance and color temperature and things like that. So you can experiment and go back and forth and see which one gives you the best mix of qualities that you desire. Now let's talk about soft proofing for a minute, but first what I want to do is I want to do another poll. I want to ask people how often they use soft proofing, whether you never use it or you use it in Photoshop, and it just came out in Lightroom 4, so I'd like to see what the attendees do in their day-to-day work. Now, see, the results on this mirror what I see in a lot of my workshop is that about half people don't use soft proofing. And this is something I think that you really need to consider. Here's the reason. You've calibrated your display. It should improve your screen-to-print match, and it will. And soft proofing is that last step that really gets you from third base to home plate. Here's the reason. The profile that you made of your display is stored on the computer. Photoshop can use that to adjust what you're seeing and to how do I put this, represent what your final print is going to look like. So for example, if you go to View, underneath that menu choice, Proof Setup, okay, and go to Custom, you will see this breakout screen that I've made here. And you can, from this list, it says Device to Simulate, you can see where my mouse cursor is. You can pick a paper profile. Remember, we all know about paper profiles and how to print with those. But you can pick a paper profile such as Ilford Fine Art Textured or Epson Premium Luster. And when you click on that, you will see a preview of what your print is going to look like when you're finished. Now, that's important for two reasons. First of all, it can be a test of reasonableness, should I send the thing to the printer or not. But if you turn this on when you first start editing, when you open the image and you turn this on, it doesn't come on automatically. You turn this on when you start and you start editing your image. Guess what? You're getting a real-time preview of the end result. Now think about what that means. You're making editing decisions, levels, curves, saturation, whatever you're doing to that image, lightness, darkness, selective adjustments, maybe you've got filters from Nick or on one, and you're making those changes. Wouldn't it be nice to see what's going to happen before you go too far down that path? I frequently find when I'm working on an image, like the image that you see on this screen, for example, has a very challenging dynamic range from shadow to highlight. And it's actually a pretty hard print to make. It took me a while to get it to the point where I liked it. But having the proofing on screen was an enormous help, because I didn't get to the end of a particular editing path and realize that I was not going to be able to go any further. I could see in real time what was going to happen. And this is one of the really valuable things about calibrating your display, is that you can manage your work much more effectively. So go all the way back to the beginning, an uncalibrated display, which in the case of the people attending this webinar isn't usually an issue. But if you compare that to the number of people using soft proofing, there's a big difference. If you turn on the soft proofing, you're going to find over time that your screen to print match is going to improve. You're going to make fewer test prints. It's going to save you time and money. It's as simple as that. So I strongly urge you to experiment with this. You can also make adjustments. You can change your rendering intents to see which rendering intent might give you the best print. Okay. I don't normally turn Simulate Paper Color on. That's one thing that some people say is a good idea, but I generally turn it off, and I'm going to correct this slide after the presentation's over. But you can certainly experiment with rendering intents, perceptual and saturation in particular, and see which one is going to give you the best result. If you're doing, if you're making black and white prints, you may want to try absolute colorimetric rendering intent and just check that out and see if there's any difference on a particular type of paper. But this is where the real power of color management comes in big time. Is you've got a calibrated display, you have a good printer and good paper profiles, and then you turn on soft proofing, and that's sweet. They all come together. Now we're gonna switch topics in some degree. I don't know how many people here actually have an iPad, but I find that it's an invaluable tool for me, in particular in making presentations to clients. For example, I'll do a photo shoot. I want them to see some of the intermediate work that I've been editing. And I would really like the color on the iPad to at least be in the neighborhood of what I'm seeing on my screen back in the office, and what kinds of, and of course, since I'm soft proofing, what the prints might look like if I gave them to the customer. And what it does is the iPad and the iPhone have a unique color palette. They're not the same as your laptop or desktop. But what the Spyder4 can do for you is that it can calibrate both of those devices and give you an improved result. Now, it's a little bit like Voodoo. The first time I did this, I called the people up at Datacolor, and I said, I don't really see how you did this. There's something that's not legal going on here. But actually what happens is that the devices talk to each other in two ways. They talk, the Spyder talks via USB to the host computer, but the host computer is talking to the iPad or iPhone via your local network. So when you first load Spyder Gallery, you load it onto the iPad or iPhone, and then you ask it to email you a link to download the desktop application. Once that's up and running, and you have both of them turned on Wi-Fi, I'm going to back up here. Once you click OK, you're going to see this screen that says Select Computer, and it's going to show that host network. In this case, it's, that's the name of my host computer here in the office. And they're going to talk to each other, and you're going to run the calibration in much the same way that you run it on your desktop or laptop. It has the white outline on the screen for your color mirror placement, and you click OK, and it runs through the color patches in very much the same way that we saw earlier for a desktop or a laptop display. And it's very straightforward, and again, it's talking via the USB cable and wireless, and I think that's just an amazing feat of engineering. Now what you can do is you can go to the viewer and look at photographs, or you can look at, this is a representation of what the difference is. This is not what, I'm going to show you what the software actually does in a minute, but this is a representation of the difference. It's called Spyder Proof. So you look at this uncalibrated image versus the calibrated image, and the first thing I look at in a portrait is the eyes. Look at the difference in the depth, the dimensionality of the eyes, and that's partly an issue of contrast, and it's partly an issue of color saturation, and also of managing the highlights and shadows. So if you look at these eyes look much more real to me in this photo than in the photo on the left. Now, of course, the flowers look much better, and then we have these color patches of some of the dominant colors in the image, and you can see the differences here. Now, these are real differences, and I'm going to switch now to an image that I took maybe a year ago, last spring. And the one on the upper left, by the way, when you look at images in the Spyder Gallery, it's like a photo viewer that's it's resonant on your iPad or iPhone. And you look at images in the Spyder Gallery, you can turn the calibration on and off. Okay, and I don't know if you can see this. Again, I'm skeptical about color management over the internet, but on my screen there's a significant difference in the flower on the left versus the flower on the right, particularly in the yellows and oranges on, I don't know what part you call this, on the flower, but the structures on the flower here on the left seem to me to be washed out. Also, the petals here are very much, the colors are subdued, they look very flat, and the contrast is really suffering. It doesn't look at all like what it did when I was photographing it. And over here, it's much closer to real life. And so now you have an iPad that, the iPads are great, but now it's improved, and it's a better tool for showing your work to others or enjoying it on your own, et cetera, et cetera. So it's really a powerful add-on to the Spyder4, and it's one good reason to own one. Now, a color managed workflow really consists of more than what we've talked about today, and we're going to have other webinars month to month. It really starts with the camera and getting it right in the camera, and you can see here on the left the Spyder Cube. We're going to have a webinar talk about that, and that's used for a number of reasons in managing your color. There's color charts that are available. You can create profiles for your camera. Of course, you're going to manage your display and your projector. And by the way, I'm going to throw this in. We didn't talk about it much, but I've used other devices trying to calibrate projectors, and projectors, as many of us know, are not the easiest things in the world to work with. I'm very rarely happy with the color I get from a projector. But the Spyder4 is much easier to use than just about anything I've tried, and it does get the projector much closer to a good condition for a presentation or teaching a class, or even just about anything you can imagine. The projectors come out of the box, they're a little bit funky. And of course on the print side. And once you get your color locked down, it may sound a little bit complicated. The soft proofing might sound a little bit complicated, but once it's part of your routine, you lock down your color, you don't have to think about it much. You just work. And you know that when you capture your image in the camera, that the color that you want is going to be given back to you on your output device, on your display or your printer or your projector, and you'll be able to manage it. And the point is to make your images sparkle from start to finish. Get it right in the camera, edit correctly to color on your display, including highlight and shadow, and then make a print that's going to match your screen. They all go together. Now I'll finish up, and we've got about 10 minutes left for questions. I want to thank Datacolor for sponsoring this. I really appreciate the opportunity to present to you. Here's my blog. It's davidsaffir.wordpress.com. There's a lot of content on there, very practical stuff about portrait retouching, about color management, about photography. It's quite a range. There's probably 270 articles on there now. And my website is davidsaffir.com. And my partner in this presentation was David Toby, and his blog is cdtoby.wordpress.com. He just did a really nice article on color issues related to the iPad 3, or the quote new iPad. And his website is cdtoby.com. So at this point, I'm going to take the remaining few minutes that we have and ask if there's any questions that I can answer for the audience live, and anything at all. Let's see here. I open my chat window. We're going to stay online until the top of the hour, so if you want, you can ask for a review of any point that I made during the presentation. You can ask specific questions. Just fire away. Oh yes, I forgot to mention something. I was warned about this, and I did it anyway. We had a promise that we put out there that we were going to give away a Spyder4 to one of the attendees. And the selection has been made, and the winner of the Spyder4 Pro is Michael Gunshian. I hope I pronounced that right. I hope you enjoy it. I think you're going to find it's a great addition to your workflow. The people from Datacolor will contact you directly to make arrangements to get the device to you in a timely fashion. Now, I don't see any more questions coming up on the screen. There's a question here, do I have a tutorial for this on my blog? I have an old tutorial on screen to print match. And yes, it's on the blog. If you go to my blog, it's one of the more popular articles on there. It needs to be updated, but it's not that far off. And I would say that that article is probably read more than any other article on my blog. I will be upgrading, updating, et cetera, probably by Sunday night. There's several things I want to add. The biggest one being the ability now to calibrate the iPad. So I hope that answers your question. What you might want to do is go and look at the current article, even though it's over a year old, and then circle back next Monday morning and check out the updated version. What I'm told, if I understand this correctly via the chat window that I'm looking at, is that there are a number of questions that still need to be answered. They're text questions, and so David Toby is working hard to answer those right now. Yes, we're going to keep the webinar. I'm told to say that we will keep the webinar open to answer those questions. And I'm going to say thank you very much again for coming. We hope to see you next time. We're going to be publishing a schedule of additional webinars on color management, photography-related issues. At the middle of the month, we've got about 6 of them planned, 7 of them planned during the remainder of the year. So watch for those announcements. Tell your friends. Thanks very much, and I'm going to sign off. Have a great week.